Now we're recording. Let me start again. Hi, everyone. I'm Coraly Rosario. I am a senior UX designer currently at Niantic. Been in the industry for a really long time, have worked with indies as well as now bigger companies. And today we're going to be talking about what the UX process is like for indie studios specifically, and all the challenges and approaches that indie studios need to take, whether they do have a UX designer on their team or not. We have 4 panelists with us today, and I am going to start with Anthony. Anthony, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Anthony Nicolosi. I am the co-founder of Cari Entertainment. We're a small indie game studio from Colorado in the United States. I am actually a full-time, we're working on Agora, a single-player physics FPS for PC and Xbox. I am actually full-time a software engineer, and we work Cari on, all 4 of us as part of the studio work Cari on the side with the hopes of one day supplanting, our full-time jobs with with the studio work. So, yep, that's me.
Good to have you. And Cari?
There we go. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. So hi, I'm Cari. I'm a UX designer from CUNY Ashton, and we're a small indie company up in Dundee in Scotland, in the UK. And yeah, we're working on our debut title, Skytales, which is kind of this gentle puzzle exploration game where you play as a flying friendly dragon, helping the people around the valley. I've worked there for almost 3 years now, straight after graduating, headed there, and was hired as their UX designer. And I've spoke a few times at Develop Brighton, which is our UK conference for games, and I'm also a BAFTA Games nominee as well, through various contests and stuff. So I've done a few things, and I've been working on the game for 3 years and still learning a lot, but hopefully I've got some helpful insights for you all.
Sweet. Gabriel.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Name's Gabriel Gutierrez. I am the founder and creative director for my own little indie studio called November Rain, and have a release title called Crumple out there in the wild. The goal is to turn the studio into a full-time supporting gig, focusing on both game development design and working in the mental health and mental empowerment side of things. That is my full-time job right now. I am deeply involved in mental health, mental empowerment, and peer support. So trying to mix it all together into the arts. So yeah, that's me.
And Gabriel and I and Elaine, we're all like Puerto Rican. So
Right.
And Elaine, last but not least, Elaine. Yes, the flag.
Hi, everybody. My name's Elaine Gomez. I am a game designer at Brassland Entertainment. We're a fairly new studio based out of New York City, focusing on just stories of people of color and hopefully making waves with the game that we're working on, which obviously we can't talk about for like another few years. But I have been an indie dev for several years now. At my previous studio was part of the dev team that released Beyond Blue, which was a collab with BBC's Blue Planet documentary, and it was about the ocean and all that stuff. And then the other game that I worked on indie was When Rivers Were Trails with the indigenous game dev community. And we put that together, and it's a historical educational game, and it's really beautiful if you ever want to check it out. But yeah, I adopt a lot of UX theology and theory into my game design. So I'm happy to chat with you all about how we do that. And thanks for inviting me on this, Coraly. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And I'm glad again to have all of you here. I love working with indies. I really do. It's you have to be so scrappy and just like super resourceful, which is one of my strong suits. And with that in mind, let us start the questions. So one of the things we always get asked is like, why do we have to UX? What is the purpose of handling user experience? Can't a game designer do that? And whoever would like to go first, why is implementing a UX mindset so important? Why does it matter?
So I can jump in because I accidentally put this as the first bullet point, so it's not fair. Somebody else has to answer that. You know, I think it'll be interesting to see what everyone, the panel, thinks on this note. For me, for our team in particular, as I mentioned before, we come from a software engineering background, where in that in the context of our work, at least, we have user stories which are surrounding like features that we're targeting to implement, and how accurate we evaluate at the end of a sprint how well, you know, it meets the customer's needs, etc. So when we wanted to start making games, we're like, we need to figure out a way to make sure first that we're making a game that somebody wants to play, because it does not seem it does not seem like a good viable business strategy. Just make a game and hope somebody likes it. You know what I mean? Like, can we mitigate risk in that regard? Make a game somebody wants to make, and somehow track progress towards that, right? It started off anyway. That's why for us, that's one big reason why we went into thinking like UX mattered. When we started diving into resources like Celia's book on the gamer's brain, GDC talks, etc., it became clear there's a whole lot more reasons that UX is important beyond just the like kind of immediate business case that we saw there. Yeah, I'll stop there for now. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see how everyone else feels.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in. So from a business standpoint, user experience is at the core of like every single product. And now we live in this day and age where, you know, you don't just have one product that does one thing. Like there are loads of products that do the thing that you need to do. So if your user experience sucks, then your consumer is going to go find another product that has a better user experience to do that thing. And that kind of applies to games. You know, it's at the basis, if it's not clear, if it doesn't make sense, people aren't going to play your game. They're going to go find something that's similar that they enjoy and that they get along with. And from a personal standpoint, for me, games are for everyone, and UX is a huge part of that. I want everyone to be able to play the games that I'm part of, and designing a UX that is intuitive, accessible, and fun is like my main goal with everything.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really good. I think for myself, and I'll use two examples with Crumple. It was all about simplicity. Limbo was a huge inspiration with regards to how to maximize the atmosphere, and how to maximize the environment, and just blew me away. What just, I mean, from start to finish, that game. And the entire time it was, there were no words. It was all visual. It was all visual, and I was like, how do I incorporate this into a platformer? Because I'd never seen anything so minimalistic yet so gorgeous, at the same time. So with Crumple, it was all about that, and that simplicity. And I remember Coraly giving me her first piece of UX advice. God, I think I was like 6 years ago, and it was just, and it was this really, really obvious thing in this section. And she's like, why don't you just put this box right here, this little platform? And it was this open area, and I'm like, what? And it made sense. And so now it became a balance, over cluttering, oversimplifying, to welcome the player, into this level. So then moving into Kinship, which is one of the other games I'm working on. Kinship is going to focus on a lot of action, a lot of storytelling. But for me, it was, it's a shmup. And for those who knows what the acronym for a shmup, my massive heart to you for that, because that's like true nerdy right there. But the thing about, not everybody likes a shmup, but for me, how do I create something compelling enough for those not just to play, but for those who don't really play to watch? And so for me, it was it was about how I want people who don't play to be like, keep playing this game. I want to learn more. I want to learn more with what's going on. That was very important for me, instead of just, who can I get to just play. I want people to be able to watch, because we find that a lot of players skip story scenes. And for me, I'm really proud about, the stories that I'm creating and the universe that I'm creating, and I want people to be able to watch that even if they're not playing it. So that was something that was really important for me to implement for both of these games. So there's that.
And the last one. So I'm going to purely speak from a game design perspective. So I have come to find, just as creating games, like just as for work professionally and like my own stuff, that the user experience is everything when it comes to game design, like from the rule sets that we create in our worlds to the goals and objectives that we're asking the player to understand and to achieve, to the signposting that we put in the worlds, like, hey, the goal's over here, or these colors mean these things, these shapes mean these things. All of those things are part of that user experience. And if we don't make those things clear, our games are not going to be fun to play, and therefore we're not going to make revenue. We're not going to do good for ourselves, right? So what I have learned the most is that all the games that we make are not for us. They're always for other people. So how can we improve that, build upon that, fix our mistakes so that they are our priority and our community, our target audience is our priority. And we can lay down our pride as like game designers and game devs, because the reality is sometimes you want to hold the game in your design as your baby and you don't want any critiques from it. You don't want anybody to tell you to change something. But the reality is that sometimes you have to completely scrap stuff because people don't get it and they're not enjoying it. And that's like the last thing that you want to have when you are building something that you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears towards. So to me, that's what user experience is literally the core of game design, is the core of our game dev, really. And if we get it wrong, everything kind of crumbles after that. So the best thing that we can do is make the best experiences we can for our audiences.
Thank you all for your answers. I actually have a small follow-up question to this, just based on like what each of you have been saying. Should this UX mindset be, should the responsibility fall solely like on game design or a UX designer, if you have one? Or should we consider this something a little like more cross-department? And I just wanted to get your thoughts, and I can clarify the question just in case.
Please do.
I could share my 2 cents on that. I think, and I might be approaching this from a kind of a long-winded angle on this one, but for me, the importance of, there's an important element to a team, and I think having everyone in your team, especially on the indie side, small teams, get everybody involved, because learn from one another. I think something we don't see often in the bigger studios is feedback from each of these different departments, because they're focused on this one area and they're focused on this other area, which of course makes sense for workflow, all that stuff. But I feel like for me, you're achieving a few things. You're putting value in your team. You're challenging them, because it's like, hey, listen, you're an animator, but I know you play games. I know you play these other games. What experiences have you had, from these things, not from an animation standpoint, but just how it felt to play. And so for me, I would say, it would be important to talk to your team, because, as a creative director, though you know a lot, you don't know everything, and you need to learn. You need to always learn and vibe off one another, because again, as I said, I think it puts value in them, and they feel valued. And and let's face it, we're human. I mean, that chemistry is important, that connectivity, to learn from one another. So some of Crumple wasn't even based off me, it was based off one of my 2D artists. I never expected it, but her brain just was like, what about this? And I'm like, oh. So, and that was years ago. So for me, I think at that point, yeah, talk to your team, whether it's just one other person, I mean, or even the people that play your game, people that test your game, gather feedback and ideas from everybody, then nitpick from there. So,
And just clarifying the question, should the sole responsibility of the UX process fall on game designer or a UX designer? Or should that process and mindset be across the team? Be something that the entire team adopts? That's what I meant.
So I'll jump in here, I think. So I am the only UX designer at CUNY, and I think that it is important to have that person who is ultimately responsible, who is sort of properly trained, who knows more about the psychology and also knows how to identify good and bad data, and also knows how to identify opinions. I think it's incredibly important for your UX designer to educate your team so that it's something that everybody can be aware of. But I have had it in situations before where it can turn into a bit of a shouting match, you know, and whoever shouts the loudest gets their opinion across, and it's not always the opinion that's the most representative of your players. So I think that, yes, get your team involved. Collaboration is absolutely key because UX is holistic and it goes through every single sort of like vein of your game. But I think that you should have someone with responsibility who sort of knows how to separate the wheat from the chaff, if that makes sense.
And to add on to that, I mean, the experience that a fan or customer in a more business way, a user, what, you know, has with your product, with your game extends way beyond just when they press start play, you know, or begin play. The marketing, the business, the monetization decisions, the support, all of that stuff encompasses a user's experience with a game. And so from that perspective, I absolutely think that I agree with Cari, like having somebody on team who can help educate the rest of the team on how to apply some of these things correctly, because I think, as we'll get into later in the panel, you can also do this some of these things incorrectly, and that can be even worse than doing it, not doing it at all in some cases. That's very important. But that, yes, generally speaking, I do think I think that tier 6 for the Nielsen Norman is like the whole UX is a mindset across the entire organization, right? Kind of a thing. So yes, I think it is something that should span across the whole organization.
Yeah, I agree too with Anthony. I think that the UX mentality, at least fundamentals, should be shared across the entire team because they're just so important in every discipline. But also, there's the reality that not every indie team has a budget to have a UX person or a UI artist even on their teams. It's just not financially feasible, and that's okay, because if that's something that you're interested in or you think it's important, it's something that can be learned. There's books out there to read. There's a wealth of information on the internet. You can watch GDC talks. You can go to conferences like this and learn. You can go to summits and you can get little certificates on things like Coursera or things like that, where you can get the general understanding of what are UX principles, like what are things that I should look out for, and that extends to accessibility. There's Able Gamers charity. You can get certified. You can go to a workshop. There's so many avenues that you can take to learn things that will be super helpful and things that you can bring to the table because you know them. And that within itself is super valuable to your team, because if nobody else knows, but you took it upon yourself to explore 3 hours of some UX fundamentals and now you know all this stuff and it really inspired you, you can come to a meeting and be like, hey guys, I found all this information. How about we focus on XYZ? And I think it'll be critical for whatever it may be. You know, you never know what you can do, what the power that you have just by the sheer fact that you're interested and you care about something and you can bring it to your team. So I'm super advocate of like, just if there's a will, there's a way. And if you're interested in it and if it's passionate to you, then go for it. Because at my previous studio, we did not have the budget for a UI UX person, but I love it. I love UX, right? So I was like, I'm going to take this course. I'm going to read this book, and I would bring it. And everybody was very supportive of it because they understood it's something that they didn't know much about, but because I was interested, I was bringing that information in for them. So that's at least from my experience, what I've been able to go through.
I just want to
And
back that up so much, like what Elaine said. That's the experience of our entire studio. So exactly what Elaine said. I don't need to repeat stuff. 100% agree.
and I think that's the really amazing thing about indie studios, like to Elaine's point, super resourceful. You have to find ways to get this done, period. So when you do have a UX designer on your team and you are able to actually have like a person take that responsibility, what does that collaboration look like with design, especially for an indie studio? And Cari, I kind of want you to answer this if you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think I kind of touched on it before, like collaboration is everything. UX is holistic, and it's important to have that UX designer in all of your design meetings, and sort of making sure that the user is being considered at every kind of stage. Sometimes game designers who aren't always like thinking about the user will design this like perfect like puzzle, for example, and then kind of like almost in isolation, design in isolation. And then I'll come in later and be like, oh, actually, this isn't great because it's not entirely clear. Some other things as well, like even down to the art team, like part of UX is accessibility, as has been mentioned before. So sometimes we've had puzzles that have had assets made for them, but then color blindness hasn't been taken into consideration. So then we've had to go back and change those assets to add things like patterns or silhouettes or iconography. And that's caused frustration because UX wasn't involved at the start to make sure that those kind of guidelines were outlined. And it's meant that we've had to go back and change things as opposed to having it in from the start to make it cohesive. So yeah, I think for me, like discourse is healthy as well, and disagreements are healthy. It's good to always have differing opinions because it just drives everybody to kind of think outside the box and get to the best solution as possible. But yeah, collaborate all the time, include UX from the start. That would be my answer.
I echo that 100%. I feel like as soon as you can bring in UX into the design of things, the better it will be, because all those considerations will not feel stapled on later, and it can just feel and look absolutely terrible. And I've experienced both spectrums of doing that and then having UX in the beginning and seeing how when we work in tandem, how much smoother everything goes and how we are able to see problems from like kilometers ahead because we had like those lists of bullet points and those guidelines from the beginning, and we're able to avoid a lot of mistakes, which has been really great. So of course, right now in the studio that I'm working at, we're starting a project from inception. So it's been incredible to have UX from like prototype phase where you're still gray boxing, you're still trying to figure out stuff, but you have that guidance because we're taking the care of really understanding the experience that we want to build. Whereas in other projects that I have been at, we built the whole thing and we have almost like alpha beta stage, and then we're talking about UX principle, and it's just like, oh my gosh, you should have done this like years ago. And we definitely saw things kind of crash a little bit after we released and we received reviews and all of that stuff, things that could have so been avoided if we would have just taken the care from the beginning to address certain things along the way without building systems like all the way through and not adding those things, for example, like accessibility, and like coming in at the end and being like, we do not have 3 months to add these set of features. So it's really, really be careful in your game dev and really just be considerate. It's all about just being considering things from the beginning will help you avoid mistakes and regrets later on.
I don't know about Gabe. I have no experience with having an actual UX designer on team, and we're having some people ask questions here in the chat. And I think that's the interesting thing about indie studios is they come in addition to being crazy and everything, like scrappy as Coraly's saying, we have different like realities, right? You got like the big triple I's, and then you've got people working on the side with whatever resources they have. So while I can't necessarily say what it's like. The UX designer conversation right now at our studio is me being like, hey, what do you think? And me replying back to me like, yeah, you're not taking into consideration the huge tax on attention right here at this part. So like I don't know. But that being said, I totally agree with Elaine, and we've have experience in our software development job where if and this gets back to that question of should UX considerations and fundamentals be more than just spread wider across the organization as just the dev team. If everyone's thinking about that and everyone's trying to ensure that we're progressing towards our goal of meeting, like having a great user experience and having a good definition of like the hypotheses and whatever that make up that user experience, and we're trying to move forward towards that. Hopefully we don't get into the situations like Elaine's talking about where we've totally neglected some aspect of design. We've invested a ton of resources developing something in the game that has this fundamental flaw, right? So anyway, totally agree again.
Yeah. I mean, and for myself, it's really if I could have if I was in a position to afford a UX person, that would be lovely. That's wishful thinking. That's a great milestone to work towards. But that's part of that's indie. That's how you're in the scrappy, as Coraly said. That's just such a great word. I'm going to use that word all day today. Scrappy. We're just scrapping. But I for me, so what's the alternative? Like what is how do we push forward? How do we keep learning? Tori, thank you. Scrappy, I love it. But so what do we do? What are the alternatives for me? Playing video games has become R&D, research and development. That's it. I play a bunch of different games to see what, and now I'm approaching these games not just from a gamer perspective, but now from a game developer perspective. What of these games worked? I used Limbo earlier as an example. Another one, I mean, this is on my top 3 favorite of all time, Journey. And just things like that, having those experiences of like what did they do, how did they incorporate it, things like that. And then that's what I'm doing until the point that I can afford a UX person to come on. So for me, I have to be and I guess that's the beauty and curse of being a founder and creative person for your own indie studio. The role you don't have, the person with a specific role you don't have on your team, you got to learn it. You're gonna have to learn it. That's it. You're gonna have to learn it and do the best you can, and just be mindful of how you learn it and how you implement it. But again, it's just that feedback from as many people as possible, to then ultimately make that decision. As Cari said earlier, which is absolutely important. So anyway, that's it for me.
Both Anthony and Gabriel kind of like answered my next question a little bit, but I want to open the question to others. If you don't have a UX designer on your team at all, what are things or what are ways your team can actually adopt that process into whatever it is that you're building? And if you can give examples, Gabriel, I know with us, like a long time ago, I consulted for you a little bit. It was completely pro bono because you're amazing and you're a super great friend. But those are like other ways that I think that you can still tap into a little bit of that UX process when you can't hire someone. But are there other ways that anyone else wants to share?
I mean, just to back up what Elaine was saying when she was talking about how you can build up, your knowledge in this area, even without, maybe having formal education in it. That was, I found it just inherently interesting, but was happy to find this, it's not because it's Celia's book, okay? But The Gamer's Brain is seriously so fantastic, in my opinion, in regards to being like a resource that first, we have actually a question about this of like what constitutes the UX fundamentals that would be good for people to, familiarize themselves with. I would tell them, I actually made the other guys on my team, I'm like, you guys have to read this book. It's required reading. because the first part talks about whatever, understanding elements of the brain, things that like is not a lot of things that are not, the insights were, no pun, kind of pun intended, mind blowing. They were, the tension, perception, and memory shortcomings that were in there, emotional design. So, the gamer's brain does a great job, in my opinion, of giving like a beginning intro into some of these, what I consider fundamentals of UX, and also how to subsequently apply that, a UX strategy for the studio. This plus GDC, even in the free GDC talks, there are the first UX related GDC talk I watched that was free on the GDC channel was the Gamer's Brain talk. But there's a ton from the Epic Studio people, but from other ones. If you type GDC UX or user research, tons of great stuff comes on. Just inhale that and get information from there. I found Coraly's article by just searching, game dev UX, and Coraly's, that was great, talking about personas, working with indie studios. There, thankfully, I'm scared of like what game we would have made, like whatever, I don't know, 10 years ago without some of these resources or something. But thankfully right now, at least there were a good set to familiarize ourselves with, good set of resources to familiarize ourselves with like the fundamentals of UX. So anyway, that's so far as much as possible. We reference those materials when we write a new iteration on our playtest surveys. We look at these and we're like, okay, are these questions good? Because a lot of times we write them and we've already done several play tests. We'll write some new questions. We review it against the book and we're like, damn, we write bad questions, like we got, well, let's tweak it this way so that it's whatever, not as sometimes, so it's not leading, sometimes so it's more specific to what we're trying to evaluate. So I don't know, leaning into those resources for us at least has been like how we've done it. Yeah.
I echo that 100%. Just not only because I said it, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I just feel like the more you can learn about something, and the more you can expand your horizons on things that that are not your forte, like the more well-rounded, better designer, better developer you're going to be. And for me, I even extended it outside of just games UX. I just went to broad UX practices and I read general design books like The Design of Everyday Things and Emotional Design and all these other things that are not necessarily about game design or game dev or explicitly the UX experience or UX theories, but it was about just general design of doing things well outside of digital stuff, including analog. And also just asking people what they like and don't like. Like I love talking to friends about the games that they're enjoying versus the things that they hate that they have played recently, because that also creating that discourse and very personal, like laid back conversations. There's so much that comes out of that. And you can learn about other people's perspectives so much by just listening to their experience with whatever game they played or a movie that they watched, whatever it may be, whatever you can consume. It's incredible how you can pick from how other people perceive things. And that can super inform everything that you're creating as well. And I find a lot of inspiration from just other people, just chatting about certain things, and just learning, just always having that mindset and that you do not know everything and that it's okay that you don't know everything. And it's okay to admit that to yourself and then go out and read something or ask somebody for help. And it's very often that we don't do that. But I think it's such an incredible thing to do, to just say, you know what, I don't know jack about UX, but I'm willing to learn, especially the fundamentals. Give me like 10 things that I should understand and know how to do so that I can do it well, instead of trying to be like, I am an expert in UX and like, these are all the things that I need to worry about when I'm creating a game. Because the reality is that most of us cannot do that. We don't have the capacity to do that. But if you're doing your best, it'll shine through.
Yeah, I think to sort of round it out there, I think sort of Gabriel said it about, you just got to learn it. When I was hired at Puny as a UX designer, I'd just done a course in computer arts. I was brought on to do UI and they just kind of assumed that I could do UX. And I sort of was like, what's this job title I've got here? What does this mean? Okay, cool. And then, yeah, and then I went away and I just sort of learned as much as I could. I went and I watched those talks, watched Celia's talks, read all the books that I could, made flowcharts, got proper creative with my colors and my pie charts and stuff like you did in high school, like getting everything together and just sort of learning and absorbing as much as you can. Yeah, I've been doing this for 3 years. I still learn every day. But it's just a case of just, dedicating that time to go speak to UX designers in other companies, look into mentorships as well, because there are loads of free, great mentorships out there. Practice running tests with your colleagues, do some practice reports and stuff like that, but like learn all these differences between good and bad data and learn those fundamentals. And I mean, I did it with not very much funding. I think I had one book bought for me, which is Games User Research, which was excellent. Love this book. And the rest of them I got out of my own pocket and just sort of trying to read through everything and learn all of it. Yeah, dedicate the time to doing it. I think if you're in an indie company, that's all you really need is just time and passion.
I just want to back up Cari's point about reaching out to people, because my experience has been reaching out to game devs in the UX scene, especially. Celia and Coraly are proof, literally. Like they're so welcoming, so friendly. I think it's super intimidating. It's like, I just read this book, you're super smart and you have such great insights. I don't know anything. I have a question, everyone has been super cool, online, whether it's just like a cold DM on Twitter or something. I encourage you, I guess, to not be afraid. I don't know. So far, people have been really cool.
So, next question. So your team has been working on this thing. You are ready to test, and that is so scary. For a lot of indie studios that have never done really proper testing, it can be very scary. With indies, there is I guess sometimes like a little bit of not a problem, but it can be a little bit tricky because a lot of times your indie games have no market comps. Sometimes they do. And you can find testers that like those types of games, but sometimes you don't. So either way, how do indie studios identify test participants? How do you get people to actually come in? And what are the different ways that you get people to come in and actually test your games? And specifically user testing, but we can talk a little bit about play testing too, because there are valuable things from there as well.
I'll jump in. We've been doing a lot of this recently with Skytales, but basically identifying participants kind of like it does depend on the audience for your game. So as a general rule of thumb, try to find the players that apply to it. But you also need to consider which testers are good for which roles. So because testing is an iterative process and it should kind of be done all points throughout the game, some teams can kind of get protective when things aren't finished, but if you've got a mechanic working a prototype level, get that in front of people. And if it's a game for kids, probably bringing in kids at that stage isn't the best thing to do. You probably want some adult testers or teenagers who are going to understand that that cube there is meant to be a person, just pretend it's a person, whereas a kid's going to struggle with that a bit. But for Puny, we did kind of several things. We have links with Abertay University, which is where a lot of us studied, and we were able to get together a team of students from there to do testing for us. For those, we understand that it's kind of biased. It's not great data because they are studying game design and all want to pick apart our game and find all of our holes in our design. So you kind of tailor the kind of methods that you're using to fit the participants. So for them, we used very, very carefully written surveys and analytics so that we were able to extract the kind of experience data that we needed. The other thing is that they had to be briefed on what user experience testing was and told, this isn't QA, please don't break it. Please don't try to escape the level. That's not what we're doing. We have some QA people doing that for us. We need your first time user experience of this. The other things that we've done is reached out to parents on Facebook, because our game is for kids, and we've said, please, bring your kids in. We can run some one-on-one observation and interviews, and we're also visiting a primary school next week to actually go and put it in front of some kids. And we're in exchange, we're doing the other members of the team are doing workshops with them. So like, this hasn't cost us anything. Reaching out to the university, reaching out to the primary schools, doing a search on Facebook, but that's how we're finding those people to kind of put the game in front of. Hopefully that's helpful.
I'll say that the way our studio went about it was a little fortuitous in that I don't know how much you can replicate. We had a co-founder who was part of several like gaming circles, networks, if you will, that so some yeah, he had an exposure to a large network of people who were maybe going to be interested in this, in play testing a game that was kind of people who fell under the personas, if you will, that we had kind of created for the game. So we got so far, all right, like some people are calling out in chat some various resources. So if you're listening to this and are not looking at chat, the Steve Bromley blog, I guess, might have some. I haven't seen that one, but obviously what Cari just said are some great methods there. But yeah, I would say one thing we followed a process outlined in Game Thinking, a book by Amy Jo Kim that identified, like, we had sort of the mindset that we were trying to identify a core segment of the market that we thought, again, using these, like, we tried to create a persona that characterized this segment of the market that had the interest in a game like Agora. And we created these super fan surveys. So this is a concept from her book. The Gamer's Brain also has a section on writing surveys as well. It's more around the playtesting aspect, but we had this Amy Jo Kim's book has a sort of framework that if you're interested, if you're listening to this and you're interested, I'd encourage you to check out that on how to create the surveys to identify those super fans. So we sent these super fan screeners to this network, filtered out a bunch of people, and then had a sub segment of that network actually get brought in for tests. So
oh, go ahead, Gabriel.
Oh, no, it's okay. No, for me, it was a lot. Yeah, my side of it was a lot more all encompassing. For it just, especially with Crumple, but both Crumple and Kinship, I should say, it was find an opportunity to like showcase my game somewhere with a lot of people, and just get a nice screen, get a nice layout on the table, and just see who notices. Because for me, I had spent so much time trying to evaluate, trying to deduce all these different methods, all these different approaches, and for me, it's like, I don't have the budget and time to be thinking of things like this. It's like, put it on a nice screen, see who bites, and then I started gauging who's who. I liked what Cari said earlier in regards to those testing out the UX and those who are just trying to break the game. Yeah, that was something. It is so much easier to find people ready to break my game. Don't know if I should take that personally, but it's fine. Point being is that it was very, very easy right away to say, okay, you're really trying to test the feel of the character, and how you feel when you implement an action on this character rather than anything else. That's how I started for me. And I just, as time went on, with every event I went to, with every presentation I gave, because I also went to a few schools to demonstrate the game, and gauge those different perspectives, I just refined the who's who from that point. So a lot more basic, I guess, than other approaches that have been shared so far, but you work with what you have. So, and that's what I did, and thankfully it still led to me releasing one of my games. So we did it. So there's that.
I can't tell you how many times, when I was working in smaller studios or indie studios, we would just go to a bar during like a meetup or something and do a drunk test on it. Have drunk people try our game. That's the best indicator. Can they actually get through this thing while impaired? It's super fun, but you have to
it's funny.
sometimes take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm actually happy you said that. One thing I did, I took I took my Crumple game, platforming game, to a Smash Brothers tournament game night. What in the world was I thinking? Like, why would I do something so ridiculous? But let me tell you something. When it came, because in my head, in my brain, I was, I'm thinking, well, it's Crumple's a platforming game. There's a lot of jumping and moving and sliding and, rolling up or whatever. Smash Brothers, you're kind of doing the same thing. So for me, it was, obviously in a different arena, but, um, and let's be real about this. Smash Brothers players are not always the most patient of players. So for me, I was saying, hey, who better to see how quickly I can upset a gamer by showing this. Thankfully, no one got upset. I think the only minor complaint was the death animation of my characters, would take too long. But it was like it's hand drawn. They were hand drawn animations, and they didn't realize that until I told them. And because they asked later, I said, no, we actually hand drew all the death animations. They're like, oh, okay, well that makes more sense. I'm like, yeah. So but other than that, there was a lot of great feedback with regards to timing, precision, response, and that was huge. And and again, it was kind of a half joke when I thought of the idea to involve those players, but damn, I got a lot of great feedback from that. So if you're doing a platforming game, yeah, you could throw it out there to other to those who enjoy platformers, but go to some Smash Brothers people. They'll tell you right away if the response and that and that the interactivity is working well there. So thank you, Coraly.
Yeah. So I gave an example very quickly, and I'm looking at the chat. Yes, the drunk test. But what are other types of testing that you've done with your games and as indies? Again, the drunk test is just one, but I'm sure you've tried like a bunch of different things.
We had like a family and friends night one day pre-COVID, where we just invited everybody to the studio and they played the game. And there's a lot of honesty that comes out of that too, especially from the younger members of the family. Definitely hit like very, very big opinions from like kids and teens, but that was really nice too, to just hear somebody who's completely like hands off, right? Varying ages. We had folks like moms and dads and grandparents, so we had that the generational gaps are also very informative too. I don't know, there's like a lot of like pieces of data that came in from different generations that were really, really important to us, that we didn't know were important, if that makes any sense. So that was really fun. That was something that we did. And another thing that I think was mentioned by somebody else, we brought our game to a school, because one of the game that I'm talking about was an educational game. It's like a game about making games, so you could code like visually, like with visual scripting and things like that. So having like a group of like middle schoolers and high schoolers learn like what an object is and what a transform means and what scaling means and all those things. And it was really nice to see them at the school being able to figure out things without us telling them and things like that. Those are some odd things that we have done to like present the game in a place that was speaking to like our target audience and like the evaluations that were made from other people that I wasn't involved in. But yeah, that was pretty much it. But then there's of course like the real playtesting, like in-house, like QA, and then the third party contracts control groups and things like that, A/B testing, and the more rigorous formal type of testing as well, which is also beneficial. But I kind of like the informal, like hands-off testing a lot better than like the real formal ones. There's always really fun stuff that comes out of that. When I was at school doing my MFA in game design, we would put up flyers and be like, we have pizza and soda at this room at this time, like come play. And a lot of really neat stuff happened there too, because you had students from different schools, different departments who necessarily didn't really play games that much, but they were there for the free food. So that was really fun too, to see people's reaction about games and like not even necessarily caring as much. Those would be like a BS piece of feedback just so that they can get a slice of pizza. So, but those are all memorable interactions.
Bribing with food +1. I've definitely done that. Anyone else? If not, because we are almost at time, and I don't know if we want to leave a little bit of time for questions. If not, that's all right. One of our last questions. So you've play tested. People have come and just kind of like, fiddle around with your game. Talk a little bit about dedicating time to iteration on feedback. And specifically, I kind of want us to talk a little bit of like, when you don't test or when you don't take a UX process seriously, how that can affect your return on investment or ROI. The work and time and money you put into this when you don't do UX.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in here first. So yeah, the way our studio goes about our development cycle is centered around playtest. So we basically are working from playtest to playtest. Generally, I think the game dev cycle has these terms of like pre-production and production. I would say we're now kind of more moving into mostly just production, making more content, but the play tests were really formative of the core gameplay mechanics and sandbox items, if you will. And the way we would evaluate that is like, okay, so what do we want to be in this first play test, right? Let's evaluate whether movement and some of the core mechanics are feeling good. We work up to a point where we feel we have whatever the content necessary to evaluate that against the questions we've defined. We run the play test, we get some feedback, and we iterate in relation to that feedback. Sometimes we'll do a play test to evaluate changes that resolve issues from the previous play test, if that makes sense. And then sometimes we'll feel good about where we're at in regards to answering the questions we came into that play test with, and the next play test will be evaluating new elements or new content. So our development cycle focuses around basically what content's going into the next play test. More or less, do we have a timeline around when that play test needs to happen? Because maybe we want to show that build to somebody, or I don't know what. And our sprints are all, and the prioritization of our tasks and all of that is with that in mind, basically. I cannot imagine, after I recently played the first play test of our first build of the first play test of Agora, and I just played the latest thing of Agora. And I absolutely understand why there's this one GDC talk that always stands out in my head where they were saying, you want to make a good game, make 10 games first. And I kind of understand why, because if you don't have any kind of like iteration process or UX process, man, that the first build of Agora is so much worse, less fun, less interesting than this current build, right? Of course, there's some amounts of like new content and mechanics or whatever, but fundamentally, it's so bad compared to this one, And that was all thanks to the feedback we got from the playtest and iterating on that. So, like to the point Elaine made earlier, had we just made a whole game like this, I spent, I don't know, years maybe working on it without ever play testing it, getting feedback and evaluating whether the user experience is lining up to what we want users to, the particular target audience, to experience when playing this, we would have wasted like 2 to 3 years of our life, right? Like we would have just put all this effort. I mean, we would have learned, we'd had some fun and whatever the heck, but fundamentally especially from a return on investment, we would have invested a ton of money and resources into something that just did not pay off, right? So anyway, yeah, so I'll stop there, but it's important.
Yeah, I just want to like double down on that because that's just the core of it. Completely 100% agree. Like the return on investment that you get is by putting those tests in early, because you develop your core mechanic and then you test it with people and then you go, okay, cool, there's all these changes. Whereas if you just make your entire game and then put it in front of people at the end, it's like, oh, damn, we need to change this core mechanic because it sucks. And it's like, we don't have time for that. We've got like 6 weeks and we're shipping. So, and then because you haven't done that, because you haven't had that iterative process and that user feedback, like people won't like your game. They won't, you won't get as much of a return from your profits, from your sales and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the other thing as well, is that doing that test early and then working on those developments prevents you from working on something for a really, really long time and then having to change it. So you're essentially redoing all of this work that you did here. And that's doing those tests and eliminating like this kind of dead work here, it's going to save you so much time, because it saves you time, it saves you sort of like how much you're paying your employees as well, because they're not having to do the same thing twice, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think UX is in everything from your opening menu all the way down to the controls you use. And my advice is just to make the time to do it. Break through that wall as soon as you can, because as soon as you've done it one time, you're going to be better prepared for any other test that you're going to run.
Yeah, 100% agree. I also have found it very valuable to have different types of playtests. And that's something that at Brassline we have been doing since our very, very first super ugly prototype that we have had. We have the design internal playtest. The entire design team gives feedback. Then we have a full-blown team playtest session where all the departments, everybody can see what's going on and give feedback. And then we have our external playtesting. We have our QA. So we constantly have multiple people looking at it, giving their perspectives, seeing what's going well, what's not going well, and using all that data, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, to iterate. And I think that has been super valuable to our dev process and has really been speaking to how we have been able to polish a lot quicker, because there's so many eyes looking at it and seeing things from different angles. And there's no way that like a 5-person design team or even a 10-person dev team can have that type of power, right? There's no way we can all see all the little nuances of the things that we're doing. But if you have tons of people looking at it very quickly all the time, the quicker you can get to that polished state that you want to get to. And you're talking about time equals money, and being able to really put something up to a publisher a lot quicker, or being able to feel like you have a demo that you could really show up a lot quicker so that you can get more money or get a grant or whatever it may be. So it's really, really important that you fail fast, fail often. That was ingrained to me at USC. And for the rest of my life, I don't think I'll ever let that go. But the more you can fail in the beginning and the more eyes you have from the beginning, the more you can polish quickly, the better you're going to be in the long run. So that way you're not crunching, like Cari said, in 6 weeks. It's like, oh man, our core mechanic really sucks. Too bad, we're going to ship it like this. And then you get a bajillion bad reviews and really, really bad scores. And then who knows if you can keep the studio open after that, you know what I mean? So it's very important to keep it in mind as early as possible. Please fail all the time now, as soon as you can, because it really saves you a lot of pain, a lot of aches, a lot of money in the long run.
For the sake of time, yes, I will just simply say demos are a godsend. Get a demo together if you can, and as early as possible. Prototype, whatever the case may be, even if it means 2 demos where one's a prototype demo and then another one is a more updated demo. But demos are a godsend, and I will leave it at that.
So we are at time. We did have like one last question, but what I'm going to encourage the panelists, if you have any resources or any additional information that folks that are watching or in chat can go to and just kind of read on or anything, please throw that in chat because the next panel is going to start. But I want to thank all of you for sharing your experience with everyone and with us. If you have anywhere where people can follow you, again, throw that in chat. But yeah, thank you again for being on this panel. And I hope everyone
Thank
has
you
a
for
great
having
day.
us.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you
and
so
an honor.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Coraly.
Thank you.
Bye bye, y'all. Thank you.
We need to all have some
Thank you.
mofongo to celebrate. Hey.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Adios,
Thank
everyone.
you.